Hi, this is Angela Cox, and I'm going to show you the next step in making your football. I've cut out my football, and I've sewn my letters on to my football. And I've only sewed them on one panel. You can put letters or anything you want on all of these, right? I'm only going to put it on one side, though. So at this point, I'm ready to start sewing up my football, right? And I should have 2 footballs of one color and 2 footballs of another. And you are going to sew together the alternating colors. So I'm going to sew the black footballs to the red footballs, right? So I'm going to start with one right here. I'm just going to put these others to the side, okay? And step number 1 is I am going to lay out these footballs, and I'm going to need some pins. So probably just a few of them, maybe 3 or 4, right? And I want the right sides together. So if I have letters on it, I want them to be facing me. I want the fuzzy side up towards me, and then I'm going to choose the right side of this fabric, the nice fuzzy side, and I'm going to put it down. You always sew with the right sides together when you're using the overcast stitch. So I'm going to sew it inside out. I'm going to make sure that these corners match, and I'm going to put a pin in it, making sure my pin goes all the way down and then all the way back up so I can see this sharp edge. I'm going to do the same thing on this other side, all the way down and all the way up right here. Then I'm just going to put one smack dab in the middle so that it will stay where I want it. Right, so here's one football. This one is all laid out and ready to sew, and I'm going to do the same thing to the other one. Now this side doesn't have any letters on it, so I'm going to make sure I have the nice fuzzy side facing me, and then the nice fuzzy side facing the other, the right sides together, right? And then I'm just going to pin them, right? One right here at the corner. Pin, pin, pin. Then this corner, all the way through, all the way back up, and then this corner, right here. Okay, and I'm going to start with my threaded needle, and it doesn't matter what you want this to be. Since I have red and black fabric, you want the thread to be either red or black. Doesn't matter which one, but you want it to match one of them. And I'm only going to sew one side of this football together. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the other one that I've set on the side over here. So right here where I put this pin, this is where I'm going to go through. Pull it tight. I don't know what kind of weird stuff I have there. Then I'm going to use the overcast stitch. So I'm going to loop over the edge right here, right? Loop over the edge, and then go right next to it. And I am going to sew these 2 pieces of the football together with an overcast stitch. Make sure you get it through both layers of the fabric. Otherwise, you're not sewing anything together. So I'm going to sew my red part of the football together to my black part of the football. And I'm only going to sew it on this one side. So I'm not going to sew this side. I'm only going to sew this side. Right here. So right here, I'm just going to keep sewing. And I'm going to sew it with an overcast stitch until I get to the pin at the end. Now at some point, I'm probably going to run out of thread, because if I got enough thread to sew the whole thing, then it would probably tangle. So I'm just going to sew up right here until I have about a hand's worth of thread left. So when this is at my hand, when I have about a hand's worth, is when I'm going to stop. So when I get to this much thread, that's when I need to tie it off and get more thread. So I'm just going to keep going and keep sewing until I have about a hand's worth of thread. And you notice, right, when I come up on these pins are only here to keep it temporarily in place, right? So if I get to a pin and it is in my way, kind of like this one, then I should take it out, right? It is only there to help me make sure that it stays together. And if I get to it, then I'm sewing it, so it doesn't need to hold it together anymore, right? So I'm getting to about my hand, right? So now I'm going to tie this off. So what I'm going to do, right, I might turn down that light a little bit, so it's maybe kind of hard to see if that helped or not, did it? Let's see here. So I got my needle, and I have this little loop right here in my overcast stitch. Let's see if I can refocus that. There we go. So I got my little loop in my overcast stitch, and then I'm just going to go through the loop, right? Make a little stitch, and then go through the loop, and make a little stitch. Remember, always do it 3 times. And then I'm ready to cut this off, and I can put more thread on my needle so I can sew the rest of it, right? Now, with these overcast stitches, the closer together you make the stitches, the better it's going to hold, right? If you make them super far apart, then you're going to have holes in between the stitches, right? So you want to make them as close together as you can, and then you also want to pull them tight, because if they're loose, then when, something happens, they'll come apart. So I'm just threading my needle again, and then this is where I ended it. This is my last stitch, so I'm going to go at least 2 stitches back. That way it doesn't come apart, because where we end this stitch, that's going to be a weak spot. And we don't want, if we're going through the trouble of sewing it up, then what we absolutely do not want is we do not want for this to come apart, right? So I'm just continuing sewing with my overcast stitch, making sure I get it all the way through both layers of the fabric, right? And see, I want to make sure I'm poking it through both of them. And again, the tighter I pull these stitches and the closer together I make them, the better it is going to hold. So I am just going to go over here to the very end, and I want to show you where to end this. So I'm going to continue sewing until I get to the end. Hopefully I can reach the end. Now see here, I'm starting to get farther apart, like I was making them really close together, but I'm starting to get in a hurry. Don't do that, right? Make sure that your stitches are going to hold, because it's much better to take longer to stitch it up than it is to have to go back and fix all the holes. Because nothing is more frustrating than when you're almost all the way done, and then you're like, yay, I'm done! And then you go to check it for holes, and there's a bunch of holes, and you gotta sew it all up again, and it's no good. Right? And make sure you get it through both layers of the fabric, too. The black layer and the red layer, or whatever 2 colors you're using. You want to get it through both of them. Now, I am going to sew this. See, I'm starting to get close to my pin. And I am going to sew it right up to this pin. And when I get to the pin, I'm going to take it out. Right? So I'm going to go right here. And then here I am at this pin. So I'm going to take this pin out, put it over here. And I'm only going to sew to the edge. I am not going to go this way. I'm going to sew this to something else. So I'm going to go right here, stitch it again, and then I am ready to tie this off. So I'm going to go through the loop, 1, 2, 3. just like that. And then I'm going to cut this off, right? So I got my thing all stitched together, and this is what it's going to look like on the other side. You can see, you can't even really see those stitches because I've done a nice tight overcast on this side. Now, I am going to do the same exact thing to this football. I'm going to sew just like that. I'm going to overcast it all around. And then when I'm done, trim this up. So at this point, you are going to sew both of your footballs just on this one side. It doesn't really matter which side you do, right? So overcast it all the way on the edge.